of Matt Goodrich. Many of you know him well, and, I think he's there. Oops, perhaps I pressed the,
Sorry, I'm a little low here. Hi, guys.
How are you, Matt?
I'm great. How are you doing, man?
It's almost like we haven't seen each other in weeks.
Exactly. And we haven't seen anybody in weeks, right?
Literally. So as I adjust the camera here, Matt has been gracious enough to be a part of an IGLive segment that we're doing on design. And Matt, maybe 2 seconds to just introduce yourself to some of the folks out there who may not already know you. I don't think there are very many, but if you could just a brief introduction.
Sure. So I'm Matt Goodrich, and I have a firm called Goodrich, which is a hospitality design firm. We're based in New York. We have 13 awesome employees, and we design hotels and restaurants, and are kind of obviously challenged as everyone is right now in doing that. We are based in New York City, but right now everyone is dispersed in New York or in other places. So we're doing our best, like everyone else is, to keep going.
I understand. I don't know of anyone who's really out there doing any other thing than self-distancing and then isolating. But I could imagine that in the field of design, that's probably a little bit more challenging than if perhaps, no offense to the librarians out there, but perhaps a librarian who doesn't necessarily need a lot of people around them all the time, or even some of the time for things like inspiration. And I don't know, but let's go to the top for a second.
Sure.
This pandemic has not just impacted the U.S. It's not just impacted North America, but it's impacting the entire continent, as well as the rest of the world. And it's a literal crisis that no one that I know, there's maybe one guy in the New York Times who survived the 1918 Spanish flu, but I don't know anyone who's ever gone through anything like this. And so as someone who's in the hospitality industry, as an owner of multiple hotels from here to Hawaii, drive-to locations, city destinations, it's been incredibly, I guess the word is hurtful. It's been incredibly hurtful. Not just to me, but really it's the hundreds and thousands of people who work in our industry who essentially have no jobs for now and the foreseeable future because the pandemic is not under control. And watching Governor Cuomo almost daily, we have not reached, as he calls it, the top of the mountain.
Sure.
And so we're all sort of locked in here for a little while. And that being said, the industry is going to change, but no one really understands how, but we know that it will change. And a lot of people think that this crisis is going to lead to a recession. And with a recession, a lot of aspects of our businesses will also change. But let's just not get too far ahead. Let's talk about now. And what's going on with you guys, and how are you approaching the work on your books, but also maybe talk a little bit about the design platform and how you're thinking about navigating what's going on. Oh, by the way, we're supposed to be drinking something at some point. If
I have
feel free. Okay, I'm supposed to be making one, which I will slowly and quietly do as you begin to speak here.
Okay, yeah. I will say I punted on the cocktail mostly because we have very limited supplies. So I'm in Pennsylvania with Tom, my partner, and we are drinking a lot of neat drinks now because we're doing our best with what we got. So I actually have some bourbon here, which if you know me and you know that I generally drink very fruity, what people call girl drinks to me, it's pretty bold to be doing this.
Whoa, that is
but
bold.
desperate times, desperate measures. I would say, what's interesting for us is we're lucky that everyone has been able to keep working where they are. Most are in New York in their apartments. Nice cutting board, Erik. Some are with family or somewhere a little farther afield. But what's awesome is to see the ways that we keep hitting these hurdles in terms of actually getting our work done, but then people come up with great ideas. I saw my colleague Ari was trying to work on some floor plans, and she didn't have a printer at home. She couldn't print anything, so she just tipped her Mac monitor down and kind of put the paper directly across it.
Oh, that's a great idea.
My colleague Chris Rizzo is in Pittsburgh. He's using kitchen parchment to draw because he doesn't have any online paper. And what I would say is, it's as scary as the time is and as awkward as it is to be doing this work, it's pretty amazing to see what constraints and impediments do, and I'm just so proud of everybody for continuing to keep going and finding ways to do the work. And that's true on all sides. That's our clients, that's our, our suppliers, and as well as, the people on my team, just trying to find a way to keep it going. So I think one thing we've all felt is that routine from Monday to Friday. We do a team call every morning. We get together and we talk about what we're going to do, and we work all day, and that feels great. And then when you get to the weekend, it's a lot tougher because you're just kind of worried, and you've got a lot of time to watch the news and watch, who knows what. So one of the things I sort of would recommend, although I'm not great at doing it, is trying to keep some routine around the creative work during the week, just to kind of keep some of that anxiety at bay.
So let me ask you this question, and for me, I'll call myself a partial creative, but as someone who really thrives in environments of some of the things that you've been a part of, some of the things that we've been a part of are design is very, very, very important.
Yeah.
And a lot of the inspiration that comes to you and your team to create what you do for us hotel owners out there, I am certain comes from not sitting in the house or in the apartment, so on and so forth. And so you talk about routine, which I think is really fundamental. But how do you keep that flame, that flicker of creativity on, so that you can really be the light to your clients during what is essentially a very sad time?
Yeah.
Where's the inspiration coming from?
Yeah, I think so much of what we do, I'm so impressed that you're able to do this. I'm going to talk to give you cover while you do a great job of this.
Thank you.
I think so much of what we do is really about bringing people together. And, that's true ultimately in the end goal of our projects, but it's also true of our process. And so being able to be connected is maybe the thing that I'm craving the most and missing the most. And for me, as a sort of non-digital native and kind of old dog, it's really hard not to be sitting in the same room with and developing concepts with my team and with our clients, seeing facial expressions, feeling energy, kind of feeling this intangible extra ingredient which comes with, as we sat across the table from each other and dreamed big and had big ideas. So I think the best that we can do is right now is we're using Zoom like crazy, and we're trying to find these ways to create that. And I will tell you that our morning Zooms, when we talk as a whole team, no one comes on screen. I think everybody's probably like not wearing pants and, has a bed head and whatever. And then we've tried to do at the end of the week, like we will do this evening, a happy hour where everyone has to be on screen so we can see each other's faces. I think finding the ways that a sort of casual, more spontaneous interaction can happen is really important. I'm so excited to see what GoTo, Cisco, WebEx, all these programs will turn into. I mean, even probably while we're doing this, I would imagine they can launch new things, and people will figure out hacks and find ways to do, new things that way. So I think as much as you can keep that connection through whatever channels, these smaller, more casual interactions are really important, really part of it.
And so the internet obviously is very powerful. Over the years, it's brought us much more close together, right? But in a time like this, when perhaps one would argue that at any given point in time, technology is at its greatest and we are as connected as we will ever be, to go to the complete opposite side of the spectrum and to be still connected but isolated is like almost a contradiction that is mind-boggling. And I think the internet has trained us to sort of want to get out there and want to connect and want to feel the energy that you're talking about with your team and your clients and so on and so forth, but it's just not happening right now. Are you finding, let me ask you, are you finding any outlets, whether perhaps it is through the internet and websites or places that you are going and finding inspiration through the internet? Or is it more book reading and getting back to some of that old school things that you were referring to earlier, which I don't think,
Yeah, I mean, one thing, it was sort of a well-timed gift. We gave our team, everybody in the Goodrich team, a membership to MoMA for Christmas. And so we all have access to a bunch of online resources that MoMA has and the collection. And I had seen a lot of people kind of going onto, museum websites and cultural organization websites, and, YouTube will provide endless, amounts of live performance and dance and music. And I usually have something like that playing in the background while I'm working. We are listening to records, to a vinyl collection that we have of mostly classical music and opera. We go for a walk every day, and that's a really nice way to kind of end the day. And I think most people can be pretty safe in doing that as long as you stay distanced and, are really careful about your hygiene on the way out and while you're out. But, one of the things, and Erik, you and I a long time ago, and working on Tommy, looked a lot at Black Mountain College, and that's always inspiration for me. And if you don't know about it, that's a cool thing to read up about now. A college founded in North Carolina during the war, where there were very few resources, and Joseph Albers taught there, and instead of using paint and traditional art supplies, he had the students go and pick up leaves and pick up rocks, and they made all these kind of texture studies. And so I think one of the things it's easy to say, and there's obviously people that are really dealing with constraints where they're really challenged. They don't have the resources they need for basic survival, and I don't want to minimize that at all. If we are sort of ensconced relatively safely, and we have food and we have shelter and we have what we need, trying to use those constraints to help spring that creativity, I think you're right. There's endless amounts on the internet, but I also think having a project or having some kind of creative thing that you're doing on the side is really an important part of that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've had is like, I'm trying to do 8,000 things at once, right? So I'm like trying to figure out what's happening with the business, trying to keep tabs on my team, keeping tabs on my family, reaching out to friends when I have time, trying to do creative work, which is, there's a lot of static around that. And then I think of a million tasks. I think everybody's probably in the kind of grieving moment and in the shock moment we're in. There's an impulse to fill your time. If you've ever lost a loved one or you've had this very traumatic experience, you tend to just go crazy filling up your time with logistics and details and things as a way to kind of block what's happening, right? And I think that's totally valid and totally fine. And I know a lot of people have really organized, really clean houses and, have done all these chores that they've been neglecting forever. But I also think one thing that I've seen is really helpful is to pick a pet project, one creative thing. And I still haven't settled on what that is for me, but something where you can channel that energy, I talked to my colleague Megan this morning, and I told her one of my plans, which I haven't done yet, is to just take a sketchbook and from start to finish, fill it. You've probably seen me in meetings, Erik, do nervous doodles where I just kind of make all these hatch marks. And I thought, why not at least frame that, and catalog that in a sketchbook? If it's that you're knitting something or you're taking photos or whatever it is, I think in the same way when you're reading a book and you get excited when you get to go back and sit down and read it again and pick up where you left off, like I think it's really important now for all people, not even just creative people, to have that kind of one channel that you're just nurturing, because you need that as much as you need the ice cream and the alcohol and all the other things that I'm doing to kind of manage the unknown.
And don't go too deep into the news, because our 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, mind-messing news resources, at least for me, just it's head spinning, and it's so head spinning that it's not productive. Let's put it that way.
You're right. I would say really, really narrow down your sources for news. I'm totally obsessed with Cuomo. I feel like he's doing an awesome job, and it's good to watch his briefings if you know what's going on, right? Yeah. But then I think, like, just really stay in fact. Try not to look at those clickbait things. Try not to look at sort of sensationalized news stories. And it's horrific. There's horrific news. We don't want to turn our back on it. We don't want to, not pay attention. We need to be informed. It's important, but try to limit the number of times you're doing that in a day. Right. I think particularly we need, those of us that are working on creative projects and working on building things, you've got to keep yourself as sort of level-headed as you can. And that's a really tall order right now. There's a huge storm swirling around all of us. So trying to keep that level thing is about not constantly triggering yourself. That's one piece of it.
From my perspective, it's the artists that are really the inspiration to those of us out there who aren't artists, or who need the different perspective that artists provide, the light that artists provide from different perspectives, in order to keep us above the fray in this time. And so it's really wonderful to hear what you're doing and what your team continues to do in order for you guys to continue to provide what you're providing, not just to your clients, but the folks who are interacting with you like we are today. Yeah. One of the other questions, though, I need to ask, because you're not just a designer, you're also a business owner. You own a design platform. What are you thinking? What happens now? Where do things go, in the sense that, as somebody who hires designers for our hotels, my perspective has changed in terms of how I'm looking at projects. We were about to launch a massive renovation of one of our properties. And right now that property is sitting empty, and it will probably be sitting empty for at least the next 4 or 5 months. And I'm really hesitant to walk away from a ton of work that not just me and my team put into creating this amazing space, or soon to be amazing space, but the numbers aren't there going forward. And this time that we're losing the renovation, the cash flows, the cash flows the renovation would create, in no one's tea leaves that I've spoken to in the past 3 weeks, and probably 100+ people, many of whom are much smarter than I am, have said, we're probably headed towards a recession. And so, from a designer's perspective, going from the peak stock market, I think hit back in February, January, something, and now going to a place that hasn't been touched in terms of the stock market in many years. I would think that designers across the world are just thinking about, well, we have to start looking at things differently as the business starts to come back. Do you subscribe to that way of looking at things? Or
absolutely. I mean, I think, I feel like we have a foot in two worlds right now. So we have a few projects that have continued uninterrupted for now, which is great. And they're large, and they are engaging, and they seem like they will continue undiminished based on all our conversations. Obviously, we're in very close contact with our owners and our other stakeholders in our projects. And yet, on the other side, who knows, right? We're sort of walking through a dark tunnel, and we don't know where the light is on the other side. And so I think for me, I'm trying to sort of have one foot in each of those worlds. It's great to have the comfort of the projects that we still have, and to have that focus. And it's a bit of almost like a a transition or something that's easing us all the way through this. And yet at the same time, I know that we've got to start looking ahead too. And usually with designers, we love constraints, we love a defined problem, or we love to at least help define the problem so that we can move into a solution. And that's what's so hard right now for everybody, is that the picture isn't even clear what it will be. As you said, it definitely is recession. Hopefully it's not even worse than that. We don't know time frame. We don't know impact. We don't know who's going to be affected the most. We already know people very near and dear to us in our industry have been dramatically affected. And so I think we have to use some of our creativity to look ahead and to look at, even without knowing exactly what the defined problem is, like to look at what are we going to do, you know? And I think what's great from both from your side, from the owners and the developer side, is envisioning projects, as well as from a decade. But we have been radically trying to reinvent and change how hospitality works. This just represents an opportunity to do it, you know, times a million, right? I mean, we really, this is like an unprecedented challenge, but I think designers and creative people, and I mean that really broadly, like the whole Indie Congress family, I sort of put in that category, is, you know, we're well positioned to at least think creatively about what those solutions are. It's going to be a different world, but we've been trying to attack and challenge and figure out what this world is for a long time anyway. So we're kind of already, in a way, prepared for it. On the other hand, you know, no one could prepare for this. And so I think we're in this exact moment, we're somewhere between kind of a free fall and looking for a solid ground and trying to look around and understand what has happened and what might still happen. And at the same time, I think it's important to be looking ahead, you know, and just try to see. There's some people with a lot of time. There are people that have been furloughed. There are people whose time has been reduced. There are people whose projects have stopped. It's the same challenge for them as well. It's like, what is the world that we're going to? What is our industry going to be like? What is design going to be like? And how can we prepare for that? You know, and that is the biggest creative challenge we've ever faced as an industry.
And as you said, it's the creativity aspect of what you do that is invaluable, and not just necessarily creating the most beautiful hotel that the world has ever seen. Like, I don't know if that's really, at least in my peer set, what I think folks will be looking for coming out of this. But I think folks will be looking for designers such as yourself to problem solve and to create value. Because from an owner's perspective, we rely on cash flow. And when there's a downturn that looks like the downturn that's coming, there's less cash flow. And if there's less cash flow, you can't do what you wanted to do before the downturn. And therefore, my mindset and those of my partners, you know, we're already beginning to think about who are the teams out there that can think through problems and create solutions that add more value than, you know, the $2,000 faucet, which may be fine for some things, but going forward, every dollar, because of the uncertainty, every dollar that goes out of that door, out of the bank account, we need to have a very high probability, a very solid feeling that that dollar is going to return at least that dollar once it hits the market and once our guests start interacting with the product. And so there are very few people out there who can do that. There are very few people out there who can do that. And designers such as you and your team are a great example. So we'll still, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think you're right, Erik. I think we're going to have to think we're going to have to think differently about, you know, how we've been doing business and what we've been doing, and then what's ahead. And that's true of manufacturers, that's true of owners, that's true of operators, that's true of developers. We know we're all, this is the moment where we have to pivot dramatically. And to your point, I think particularly for designers, it's about being extremely strategic, you know, and I think we've had this boom era, and we've been very blessed to work with great clients, and also a lot of first-time clients, and be building projects that are really just sort of pushing the outer edge of opulence, of specialization, of, you know, whatever. And that's been a real pleasure for everybody, and that's been great. I think we're going into just the exact opposite, right? We're going to be trying to stretch our resources as much as we can. It's going to be probably sort of in, you know, tone deaf to be developing extremely luxurious projects. It's going to be, you know, we're going to be looking at reducing waste, at trying to be very careful with not only stretching our clients' budgets, but also even maximizing what can be done. And I think those kinds of constraints, and that kind of pulling it in and narrowing down sort of the scope of what the designer is doing, should actually produce better and more interesting results. I shouldn't say better, different and more interesting results. And I also think, you know, so there's one piece, which is how will the design process and you know, what is built and developed change. And then the other, which we really don't know, but I mean, particularly look how wiped out hospitality has been by this extreme you know, social distancing and separation. So where in our industry, in both lodging and in food and beverage, do we need to make changes, and what's next on that side? You know, and I don't think anyone, I don't know, some very smart people may already be thinking about that. I don't think we're starting to do that yet, but I think we know not only will the industry be different in terms of the types of projects and the ways we can work, and the role of the designer having to be much more strategic and much more creative within much more limited resources and probably with less time, but also what problems are we going to be solving? I was speaking to Audra Tusks the other day, and I was talking to her about the analogy of after 9/11. If you remember, when you started traveling, all of a sudden there were Rubbermaid bins and stainless steel restaurant tables in the security line, and it was whatever they could improvise and come up with as a standard very quickly. In many airports, that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's a decade later, longer, and we still haven't actually really reinvestigated that. I think both in lodging and in food and beverage, there's going to have to be a wave of adaptation to this too. Which will be an opportunity for designers to, again, lead the way and find a different kind of expression going forward.
Do you want to take a gamble, or you want to throw an idea out there, Matt, as to what's one thing that may change coming out of this pandemic?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, there's two that I always think about. One is when we're designing hotel rooms and we talk about like the illusion, right? We sort of have a shared social contract that like you want to believe as a guest that no one has ever been in your room before, right? And we do all these things to keep the room actually clean, but also to design it in a way that feels psychologically clean or cleanable to us, right? And obviously now it's going to be like next level, right? Any of us that are taking a chance to lie down in a bed or bathe in a hotel room, we're going to be looking at it with like a more obsessive OCD, you know, health conscious mindset. And so I think that's one huge thing that will change, like the standard of care that a hotel company and that operators have to instill is going to just be different and feel different, right? And then I think another huge one is, I mean, we're doing this now. I spent more time on Zoom in just the last 3 weeks than I have probably ever, you know, through a lot of video conference. But in our work, we really have tried to prioritize being, you know, face to face and being there for any major milestone and sitting together and sitting across the table. And I just, for better or for worse, this has proved that might not be, not only isn't it possible now, it also might not be necessary a lot of the time. And, you know, one of the positive things, if there are any silver linings that people share with each other, you talk about lower pollution, you know, like just less
carbon footprint.
travel is kind of easing the pain on some of these destinations and on our big cities. So I think we'll kind of learn that that in-person meeting will be very special, and in what we always invest in hospitality for celebrations and for connection. But I also think that probably the way we do business will involve less face-to-face and more digital interactions. So that's difficult. I mean, for me, it's difficult because I like being face-to-face in business too. But I do think what that does say is the demand on the hospitality experience on a place where people can gather together to celebrate and socialize and support each other will just be that much more important. You know, there'll just be that huge demand.
And meaningful.
Meaningful.
I think that all of us are now allowed to sit back and really think through, like, what's important to us. And sitting in one's home, missing whatever you're missing, I would think that a lot of people are going to start trying to figure out how they can perhaps change their lives a little bit so that they're doing more of those things that they perhaps pass by in the speed of the internet culture that we live in.
Yeah, right.
So
I would say, you know, so as a New Yorker, you know, most of what you're doing is you're meeting over a drink or a coffee or a lunch or a dinner, and you're conducting business in this way, and the meal is kind of not, I don't know, it can be secondary maybe, right? And I think thinking about savoring those moments, and just savoring the connection, I'm just aware of how much I've been doing, not on autopilot, but just without being really present, you know? And it's not because I'm super present and grounded here. It's more because I'm craving those moments we used to have. Like, I would kill to walk into 9th Street Espresso down the block from our studio and have a cappuccino, you know? And I would love to run into, you know, one of my colleagues, that block on 29th Street, there are like 10 design firms: Gold Lighting, Dutch East Design, Louis Cermaki Lewis, Charles & Co., like all these firms, and you just kind of run into each other, and that's not going to happen, you know, for a while. So I think it'll make those things be much more meaningful, and I think it'll hopefully train us to be a little more present for them in the future.
I agree. I'm going to ask if anyone in the audience has any questions before we wrap this up. You can just type it in at the bottom, and as it pops up, I can throw it out to Matt. I think just in general, we're still in a point in this experience that we don't know when the outcome will be, and everybody has their opinion as to when it will be, even the smartest people in the room. And I think that if anything we can take from this conversation, it's that we just need to, take care of ourselves first, our friends, our family, our loved ones. Now is not the time. I think Cuomo said the other day on one of his lectures, it's not the time to be angry at other people. It's not the time to not help out your peers and other folks who are perhaps going through this experience not as easy as some of us may be or may not be. And that's the priority. And in the meantime, I think it's this constant communication between ourselves and our peers in our industry and outside of our industry to really figure out where we're going to end up after we exit this thing. With that, is there anything else, Matt, you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Eric, I'm reading this question at the bottom of the screen. I don't know if you can see it, which says, what will food service look like in the new world? And I have absolutely no idea. You know, I think like I was saying before, just from the project side, we're kind of have one foot in the old world with projects that are under development and are still going, and that's probably true across the industry. And then we also don't see, maybe for the first time in a long time anyway, since the last recession, where you kind of can't see where the trapeze is that you're trying to grab onto. So I don't know, even at a project level. I mean, you've seen how restaurants have been very creative with delivery and with off-premises food, and sort of how a whole new idea about safety around food and interaction has been developed. But I can't imagine that we will, as a culture, accept that that's the only way we're going to get food and the only way we're going to get meals. So I think, you know, I don't know. I'm quite hopeful that we will find creative ways to, you know, reinvent a little bit the spaces that we gather in to dine so that we can still do that, you know, obviously we have the immediate threat of this, you know, coronavirus and kind of this pandemic, but given what we've seen, what it's shown us about the world, we have to think in a different way going forward. I'd be a fool to tell you I've already figured it out, you know, but I think anybody that is sitting with time on their hands and is looking for that kind of creative project, that would be using your empathy, using your compassion, using your strategic thinking, starting to think about that. And I think that's something that as an industry we'll have to work and develop together, you know, from the service side, from restaurant groups, operators, owners, as well as designers. What do we do to keep people safe, you know?
Yeah, I think those are good points. There's one other question here that popped up about consumers. What consumers do relative to your industry once we get through this, at least from my perspective, and I'm encouraging everyone I know and their mother to, as soon as they feel safe, is to get back into restaurants and to get back into hotels.
Yeah.
The industries have been decimated, and the way that we're looking at it, interestingly, from the Eagle Point hotel perspective, we don't think that folks are going to get very comfortable getting on a plane and coming to New York City anytime soon, until the government can say that, you know, this virus, we have a vaccine, or the virus has been eradicated, or whatever. Whatever they can say to make people comfortable getting back into tight spaces, coming to really compact places, and existing very close to other people in the population. And so what we are really guessing is going to want to get into their cars or into some sort of form of transportation and get out of their cities and go explore 2, 3, 4 hours away, where they know that if there's another hotspot or something like that, they'll be able to get back in their mode of transportation and get back to their home. So that would be the recommendation. Feel comfortable and then get out on the road as soon as you can.
Yeah, and I think from the food and beverage side, you know, I think we all have well, again, I speak as a New Yorker that eats out probably disproportionately more than in other cities maybe happens, but, you know, we have our favorite restaurants, and one of the really important things, I think, is if you can, to help support those restaurants by buying gift certificates. I think you've seen in some great, Missy Robinson and Sean created a fund. Danny, one of our clients, Danny Meyer, created a fund for Union Square Hospitality. You know, there are ways that you can directly help restaurants and employees from restaurants. There's a whole lobbying effort going on, Save Our Restaurants, and there are a lot of I think if you just look to your favorite restaurant groups and restaurant groups that you've supported for a long time, lean in, right? See what they're doing. You know, we've called our representatives on their behalf. We've bought gift certificates to help, you know, and some of these companies, at least that way, have money moving through. But I think our industry, both on the restaurant side and the hotel side, has sort of been in many ways overlooked in this, and particularly the employees, because it's such an unusual structure, the way hospitality employees are paid. And so I think looking at that and how you can support in the right now, you know, is to the extent that you can do that, again, given how uncertain everything is. And then on the other side is when we can open up again, you've got to really be there, you know, as you're saying, for both your hotels and restaurants that you love, and really boost the hospitality industry with your dollars as much as you can, because we're going to need it really badly on all fronts.
We are. And so I think, first of all, I'm 100% on the right, 100% on the page with you. It's the right way to look at things in the immediacy, and ordering takeout as often as you possibly can.
Yes.
In addition to supporting those funds, But other than that, I think, we still have a little ways to go. We're not near the top of the mountain, as Governor Cuomo says, but we're getting closer every day. And I think when we get to the top, we can see down the other side. We'll be able to better assess the impact and what we need to do to go forward. And perhaps, Matt, it's another conversation that you and I have however many weeks from now, when there's a little bit more light at the end of that tunnel that we've been talking about.
I look forward to that light. And what I would say, Eric, in the meantime, and this is true, it's in our DNA on every part of hospitality industry to help people, to serve people, to reach out to people, to make a better experience for them, to take care of them. In the absence of being able to do that physically, the best thing we can do is reach out and connect to people digitally, right? So FaceTime people, Zoom people, call people, have movie watching parties, have a meal together on two sides of a screen, whatever it takes. Like, that is sort of a very pent up part of our personal expression right now. And the best thing you can do while we're waiting for that light is to use that energy that we've all been doing ourselves in our work over the last years and channel that to each other, support each other.
Agreed.
When we get together.
Agreed. And thank you very much. And thank you for the audience out there. You guys have been quiet, but that's because you're not on screen with us. And the ILC, thanks to you again. We are still planning for the rest of the year. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on out there that may prohibit us from having that special gathering that everyone attended last year. But more to come. Matt, thank you again. Look forward to chatting with you in person.
All right, me too. And thank you so much. This was really great. It was really nice to connect this way, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks to everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.